I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
Welcome to Lazy Reviews. Today's video is on James Cameron's Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991, the sequel to James Cameron's The Terminator from 1982, a movie I already did review on this channel. So you can watch that if you haven't watched this one yet. I'm of course on my quest to review all the Terminator movies, all the movies in the Terminator franchise. I'm not that far yet, but I'm fine with where we are right now because The Terminator is a great movie, of course. It's an excellent movie. I have a lot of love for that movie. But this movie? Terminator 2 Judgment Day? Probably even better. Of course, I therefore have a lot to say today, and also I'll try to keep it short, which, knowing myself, I won't, but you'll see that. You can see how long this video is. And I will, of course, also try to keep it low on spoilers when talking about this movie, but I will have to spoil some things, as I'll be talking about character progression, character dynamics, the story overall. I want to talk about the special effects, some of the scenes. And that, of course, entails not only spoiling this movie, but also spoiling The Terminator. So if you are fortunate enough to not really know much about the movie, then I would highly recommend you to first watch The Terminator from 1982, then this film, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, just so that your experience is not really influenced by other people's thoughts about the film. Also, so that your experience isn't spoiled by whatever spoilers I give away or that other people would give away in their discussions of this film. It's better just to go in blind and savor this experience, this masterpiece. This is such an amazing movie, and so much of it, especially in the beginning, in the first half, first third, it must have been mind-blowing for the people watching it the first time. And I really wish I could experience that again. And right now, I'm not even sure I can live up to all the praise I've given this movie, because my video will only be a wet blanket next to it, but a wet blanket of love. A wet blanket that praises this movie for how good it is and dives into it and examines why it holds up so well. And of course, if you end up disagreeing with me or not really liking this video I'm making, just know you can always go in and watch Terminator 2 Judgment Day again. I mean, at the very least, I hope to encourage you to watch the movie, rewatch the movie, watch it if you haven't seen it before. Just enjoy this masterpiece. Not magnum opus, because James Cameron has made a lot of good movies, but it is just a brilliant movie. And I therefore want to get started with it.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
So with this long intro out of the way, let's get started talking about Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991. And like the first installment, this film starts up in the distant future of 2029, where the humans are fighting the AI Skynet and its army of terrifying robots. This is the same future we saw glimpses of in the first film, and with Linda Hamilton's character Sarah Connor surviving the first film, giving birth to John Connor, we now see John Connor leading the resistance against the robots. We see this as Linda Hamilton's character Sarah Connor, in a voiceover, explains that the robots now, at the zenith of their defeat, once again decides to go back in time to try and prevent John Connor from ever leading the resistance against them. And the future is now once again at stake. We then cut to the present day where the T-800, again played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is teleported back to the present. And immediately upon arriving in the present, he spots a dive bar, walks in completely in the nude, walks up to this biker, says the iconic, and a bar fight ensues. Being the unstoppable badass he is, Arnold Schwarzenegger leaves the bar with a nice leather jacket, some cool ass shades, a lever action shotgun, and a motorcycle, and also a pistol. He is armed to the teeth already from the beginning. We then cut to the next day where John Connor, played by Robert Furlong, is listening to some sweet ass rock while fixing his bike with his mullet rocking friend. And we are also introduced to his foster parents, because he no longer lives with Linda Hamilton, no longer lives with Sarah Connor, but with foster parents. A lower income household with a mom who seems sweet enough but may not be the best, and a foster dad who seems quite deadbeat and to be a lousy father figure. At this point in his teenage life, John Connor is a bit of a rebel. He doesn't really care about anything. He doesn't care about the rules. He doesn't care about the authorities. He constantly gets into trouble, and he just wants to hang out with friends, skipping school. Well, not giving a flying fuck, to be honest. And it's understandable with a mom like Sarah Connor. She knew the world was ending, and she knew the role that her son, John Connor, was destined to play in it. That he would grow up to become the resistance leader that would lead the humans to victory against Skynet. She therefore did everything she could to prepare him for this role, including hooking up with men and creating contacts with anyone who could give her shelter, give him shelter, give him or her survival training, weapons training, stockpiling arms around the country. Well, anything they could really think of to improve the chances of survival. Not only of surviving the future and winning the future war, the war that was to come against Skynet, but also in case a Terminator, in case another robot, another being, another force was sent back in time to kill him or her or both. That's not exactly a mother figure. It's not exactly a caring person. If we saw someone like that today, we would probably call that person insane. Completely and utterly insane. A raving lunatic and not a good mother figure. And that's also how he feels about it. He feels left behind by a mother who cared more about a distant war in the future that he no longer believes in. And therefore, of course, he wasn't really grown up to have a childhood. He didn't really attend school. He was given a different kind of education. An education in arms training, in engineering, in manufacturing small things. He likes tinkering with things. He was given all these traits that would be good in the post-apocalypse, but don't have much application, well, as a kid, as a teenager. And, well, that's why he feels left behind. He is not living his best life. And that leads me to the next scene, where we see Sarah Connor doing some intense workout from a cell in a psychiatric hospital. And it is revealed through exposition dialogue told by the psychiatrist we saw at the police station in the first film, so I guess he survived the shootout or had already gone home at that point, that Sarah Connor has been at this hospital for 6 months, following her attack on a high-tech research building to prevent the future from happening. We also repeatedly informed that she tries to break out again and again and does everything she can to escape and be with her son to protect him and prepare him for the future. And that she hasn't seen her son for about 6 months at this point. And it is because of these repeated attacks and escape attempts that she's held at this high security hospital, at this high security mental ward, rather than a more regular one. And we see how she struggles. In one scene, we have the doctor playing back video footage of her, telling about how the world is doomed and how everyone will die. And then she tries to fake it, tries to fake her sanity, tries to say she's better so she can see her son, and also so she can try and escape again. And of course, they're not buying it, and that's her struggle. She's locked up at this place and she can't get out. And not only is she locked up there, she is suffering intense abuse there by the guards who are doing horrible things to her. She's really being abused and it's very nasty. So her character is not in a good place and hasn't been for a while. Probably since the ending of the first film. So moving into spoiler territory now, I'll say a bit more about the plot. The T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, has been reprogrammed by John Connor in the future and has been sent back in time to protect young John Connor against Skynet, against the robot sent by Skynet, the T-1000. The T-1000 played by Robert Patrick. And it is in this legendary hallway scene where we see them duke it out for the first time, where John Connor, caught between two very intimidating powers, two very intimidating beings, is puzzled as what to do. He seems like, yeah, I'm done for. But then Arnold Schwarzenegger says, "Get down!" and starts blasting away with his lever action shotgun, making these interesting holes in him. Chrome holes, chromatic holes, or whatever you would call them, that heal. So remember the first film. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the T-800 in the first one, could take a lot of damage, but he couldn't heal himself like that. If he actually took damage to his body, he needed to spend a lot of time repairing it and fixing it as much as he can. No, this new one, he can heal himself in no time. It already ups the ante here. It adds to the stakes. It does what a good sequel should do by creating an even more intimidating power, by creating an even more scary part that the future has to offer. And that is this monstrous killer machine that we, from the very first time we see it in battle, realize this is way more dangerous than Arnold Schwarzenegger, than the T-800. And that should make us worried about John Connor and his chance of survival. And also in this scene leads to a brilliant, insanely good chase through LA, through the dried out canals of LA, and trucks being blown up, roofs coming off, motorcycles and shotguns. It's a really, really good scene, and it leads to other good scenes where now John Connor is, because he grew up with Sarah Connor, he grew up knowing about Skynet and this future, he immediately understands what's happening and that his mother was right. So no need to explain anything to him. He's on board from the beginning, which is also really well made, really understandable essentially. And then what will happen next? We see how this T-1000 not only can sustain a lot of damage and heal himself immediately, but also he can transform his body into weapons. There's a really good scene where he kills someone by impaling him. His arm extends into a sword and he can blend in with the floor. He's a liquid mass who can also be solid, and it's really, really cool. I'll talk a bit more about that, a bit about the effects later on, but so far this is an enemy, this is an antagonist, one of the best antagonists probably of all time. This is so well thought up. This is one of the best antagonists of all time. Probably, maybe potentially the best antagonist of all time in movie history. He's so well thought up, at least for antagonists that are not exactly human, but you know, for non-human antagonists, probably one of the best of all time. Of course, they have to rescue Linda Hamilton, who's also in the process of rescuing herself from the hellhole she's trapped in. Then it turns into a bit of a road movie that focuses more on character development and drama and them coming to terms and discussing what to do next and what world are they living in. So first they're trying to escape, then they talk about, realize that they might actually prevent this future from happening. So they decide to take on Skynet, or rather Linda Hamilton decides to take on Skynet, and then they join in their own way. Not going into too many details here. And of course, it leads to the final showdown with the T-1000. And there are many showdowns along the way. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, okay? I don't want to talk more about the plot itself, but I think this lands into the pacing of it. I want to talk about the pacing, then a bit about the character development and characters. I think that's what will naturally follow next. Maybe some things I will emphasize, and then I'll finish with talking about the cinematography and sound design and effects. So here we go.
Camera 1, camera 2.
I am very close to saying that the pacing of this movie is perfect. It does start off much stronger than the first film. The first film had an amazing beginning. If you watch my video on it, I said that this is possibly the perfect start to a movie. And this one, because we've seen the first film, or probably have seen the first film before seeing this, it doesn't need to dwell on it as much. So the first film actually is a long process. It takes a long time for Arnold Schwarzenegger to arrive and to slowly develop and to arm and to start his carnage. But we already know that's coming this time. We already expect it. Of course, we don't know, and that's the amazing part of it. We don't actually know if Arnold Schwarzenegger is a hero or not, or if the T-1000 is a hero or not before we know he's, like, at the beginning, he could be a human. Of course, he looks intimidating from the beginning, but he could essentially be a human. Or it could be two robots out for John Connor. We don't know that when the movie opens up, and that is a very strong start, and that's why I didn't want to spoil it. It's only 30 minutes into the movie where you realize, okay, so Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually the good guy this time. They took the bad guy and turned him into the good guy. That is such a power move. It's excellent. It's not that it's the first time it's done before, and of course, these being robots, it makes sense that they can turn him into the good guy. It's amazing. It works so well. It works so well. And he goes from being the most intimidating monster in the first film, and now he is actually becoming quite a caring person, but I'll talk about that a bit later. So the whole thing about him transporting to the past is much faster than in the first film, and also imagine that he travels back in like a sphere or something. So you can see the cutout of this truck or whatever it is, where it has just completely disappeared wherever that bottle would have been, and like it's still red hot from the energy unleashed from when this bubble was appearing in the past, and there's also a big dent in the ground where he's now sitting in. Of course, this is not in the first film, but it is quite a nice effect. I do like it. It adds a bit more oomph, physicality to the film. You can sense it a bit more. You can sense how this technology works. And I think that works quite well. And he very quickly, the whole thing about him getting up and moving back and forth, of course, that is much faster. Something I did notice because, of course, if you've seen my first film, you've seen me doing the same thing, and I counted the time, everything, and yeah, this is much shorter. And he very quickly just finds this biker bar and then unleashes hell on these people, just breaking arms, disarming them, well, not their arms themselves, but, you know, taking their guns, impaling people with knives. So yeah, you do get the sense that he's dangerous, but he doesn't outright kill. Even the guy threatening him with a shotgun, he just walks up to him, takes the shotgun from him, and leaves. So even if you're unsure in the beginning if he's a good guy or not, he at least shows less propensity for deadly force. Still, for violence, but he is not as eager to kill or as careless about killing as in the first film. So you do get a sense that maybe something is different. The same thing with Kyle Reese. When you see him in the first film, he goes out of his way not to kill. And of course, we don't see what happens with the T-1000. We only see him doing like this into the police officer. And then the next thing you see, he's wearing his police outfit. Of course, later you realize it's actually not him wearing it. He can mimic it. The body he has, he can mimic any human form, even clothes. So he's not wearing it. When I was watching it, I thought, oh, that's quite convenient that he could just put out like the clothes fit. I had actually completely forgotten how it worked. As much as I love this movie, it's not a movie I watched religiously. So even for me, a lot of it felt fresh. I'd forgotten a lot about it. So I did get to almost relive it as not as having seen it before. But of course, I still know the major dynamics of it. But I did have these things happening to me that, oh, I'd forgotten how this happened. So you have this pacing, you don't really know. It's much faster in the opening, much quicker to just get through like the beginning. Like, okay, yeah, let's see these people, how they get the dress, chest and everything, sure, whatever. And also T-1000 very quickly tracks down, because now he's of course has access to these police files, very quickly tracks down the foster family, the foster parents of John Connor. So it has these action, and then, oh, okay, let's see what happens with this John Connor character. Oh, here's the T-1000. Oh, now we have Linda Hamilton. That's action again. She's working out, she's cool. You see how she's developed, what has happened to her, and then she's getting abused by these scars. So it really quickly establishes this universe you're now in, how things have progressed since the first film, and how the two Connors are caught in a situation they need to get out of, and also in a situation that is very dangerous to them, knowing that these two robots, or at least potentially two robots from the future, are now out to get them. And that's pretty much what happens until we are at the aforementioned arcade scene where there's the hallway shootout. Then we have that action masterpiece. Once that's over, I felt like, okay, what are we, 15 minutes into the film? But no, the shootout starts 30 minutes into the movie, and it's just because it's paced so well that it goes by like that. It's so well made. I didn't realize more time had passed. Then, of course, the whole them trying to figure out what to do, and us seeing the T-1000's capabilities, that he's capable of mimicking voices, of mimicking people, of him taking the shape of a floor. All these things constantly ups the ante, or realize how much more dangerous and how much more of an unstoppable force this T-1000 is, especially even compared to the T-800 of the first film. That means even with T-800 on John Connor's side, we are not exactly feeling safe. I would say we're not really feeling confident that they will survive it. Of course, it is. We know it probably will happen, but we're not that. You have reason to doubt that they will succeed, because the T-1000 is dangerous. He's an unstoppable force. I wish I could use some other words right now, but my brain is preventing me from remembering any synonyms or anything. So, you know, it's lovely when you're having English as a second language. So sometimes you're failing yourself. So.
And what is pertaining?
I didn't understand what you said.
Pertaining, what it's meaning, regarding.
And yes, of course, the whole Sarah Connor breakout, the whole dynamic of how she is trying to escape this psych ward. John Connor and the T-800 are going to try and rescue her, because the T-800 knows that the T-1000 will track down Linda Hamilton and try to get information out of her, or to use her as bait for John Connor. So they go also to rescue her from the T-1000. So there's this like a race for time. In the first film, it's more just about escaping the T-800. Here, there's actually a question about time. This needs to be avoided. We need to constantly be on the move to do these things, to achieve these things. So the pacing of this movie also has to be faster than in the first film, because the stakes are different. The stakes are actually more with a time limit. We also know that the future, that the nuclear war that Skynet will unleash will be very soon in the future. So that's also why Linda Hamilton is rushing to get to John Connor. She can't be in a psych ward, because she knows that within half a year, the nuclear war will happen. So she can't be in a psych ward. That's why it's so important, even before she realizes, because she doesn't really know that these robots are back to get her, or to get her son. But she knows that she needs to be with her son for this nuclear apocalypse, or at least to still keep training him before it happens. So there is the ticking clock dynamic is much stronger than the first film, and for very different reasons, and that does help the pacing. And we do have this whole dynamic there with them, of course, rescuing them and then fleeing that. And upon rescuing her, we're about an hour into the movie, and that's here where I will say that this hour is marvelously paced. So far, the pacing could not be better. The dynamics, all the things set up, the ticking clock, the whole thread, all the things, 10 out of 10. Spectacular. And then the next half hour or so it takes a dive. It becomes more a road movie where they're trying to escape the T-1000, and where John Connor and Arnold Schwarzenegger is developing this friendship, or rather a father-son relationship, and where Linda Hamilton has to start realizing that she can't do everything on her own, that she is, yes, a force of nature, but she needs to rely on her son. She needs to trust her son. And she needs to also actually trust the T-800. Of course, she's completely traumatized seeing the T-800. And it takes a while for her to actually understand that we need this. This will help us. Which of course works very well. But yes, this next half hour, it's good, but it's just a very different movie. It is more drama, character driven. And that is quite nice, and it works well for the second half of the second half. So it works quite well for the finale, which is spectacular, as I said earlier. It is probably necessary to give the audience this breather, to build up tension and drama and just character development for the end of the film. So the pacing is great, but that does lead into what I want to talk about next, which is the characters and the character development.
This is my house.
the movie simply wouldn't be the masterpiece it is without the characters of T-800, T-1000, and the two Connors. It has many things working for it already, but it is these four characters and a lot of the side characters that make it this amazing experience that it is. And I think the most interesting character to start with is Sarah Connor, because of course we have the perspective of seeing how she's developed from the first film. And if you've seen the first film, and also if you've seen my video about the first film, you know how much I praise her character in the first film, and how she goes from being this naive young woman, essentially a nobody, working at this cafeteria, probably with dreams and hopes for the future, but without any real idea of how to attain them, and just going through life. And then of course her whole life gets turned upside down.
This is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
Carl Reese comes back from the future, rescues her from the Terminator, and informs her that actually she's not a nobody, that she's the most important person alive, that she's the one who will save the future, she's the one who will give birth to the resistance leader of the future. Suddenly she is the most important person alive, and how do you cope with that? Of course we see her in the first film coming to terms with that, coming to realize, accept it, or trying to accept that she actually is important, that she is very important, that suddenly she has the whole weight of humanity on her shoulders. And we do see that happening in the first film. And of course we do see at the end of the first film she drives off to Mexico with her dog, trying to live her life, trying to prepare for the future. But although we do not get minute details about what happened between the two films, I'm not exactly sure how old John Connor is, but he's probably 13, 14. So let's say between 13 and 15 years between the two movies. What happened? We learn that she spent most of this time, if not the entire time, preparing for the future. And more importantly, preparing John Connor for the future. So she tried to do all the things she could to get into contact with people who could teach them valuable skills, teach them how to use weapons, teach them all these skills that are useful for the future. We constantly see John Connor tinkering with stuff, so that's just blend in with him in the future being able to reprogram a robot. So of course that's what she spent the time on, to give him this not really traditional education, but one that prepared him for the future without really being useful or very useful for the present day. He was not a kid who went to normal school. He was not a kid who got to socialize with other children. At least it doesn't seem like he was able to do that. And of course, he's also growing up thinking this is normal. He grows up thinking it's normal that, yes, of course the future will come crashing down. Of course, that has a very big impact on him, but we'll get to that a bit later. So that is what Sarah Connor is doing for him. And of course, these people that she's hooking up with, they're probably not the best partners or father figures. They might be abusive, alcoholic, they're militiamen, they are renegades. We see some of them later on in the movie and they seem to be nice people, but it has probably been a rough life for her and for her child, and she constantly had to think of herself. She has this knowledge about the future that even if people might pay lip service to it, I'm not sure exactly how much she shared about it. Maybe she didn't share it that much, but it has made her alone in the world, essentially. That's all something she has to deal with, and she had to be a very, very, very strong person, a very independent person. And it is this strong, independent person that she is then also comes back to bite her in the ass. That is one of the things she has to struggle a lot with in the movie. To overcome, to start trusting other people, to work together with other people. She is very intelligent, but also very rash. She's very quick to jump to action, and we see how actually she does sometimes maybe create problems for herself by not acting in the most rational manner and in the most strategic way, but rather acts in the most impromptu way that you can think of, the most instinctual way of trying to either get out of a situation, to create safety for herself or for someone else, or just to get revenge. Because one problem for her, and revenge is maybe the wrong word here, but one problem she is struggling with, of course, is that, yeah, she knows what's happening in the future. And even if she's right about the future, and even if nobody believes her, it does make her insane. She is bonkers. She has lost her mind. You can't live in a world as the only person knowing it will come crumbling down. How do you live with that? You can't. And we see that she can't. We see the reason why she's in the psychiatric ward in the first place, this high security psychiatric ward, is that she carried out this terrorist attack against this tech company. Also, it's revealed that she constantly tries to escape, and she breaks fingers and bones and attacks people to try to escape. And that's also because of this ticking clock element. She needs to go back to John Connor before the nuclear war starts and everything, so that does make sense. But of course, that makes it even more difficult for her to escape, that she tried to escape too quickly, hasn't really planned for it well enough, and that creates this whole situation, makes it much more difficult for her. And we also see how she's confronted with this. There's this very iconic scene where she is being questioned by the psychiatrist, being confronted with footage from a talk he had with her, where she lashes out saying, "You're all dead, don't you see? We're all dead. You're dead. Nothing matters. Don't you get it?" For everyone else, that's an insane person saying it. And of course, she is right. It doesn't really help her case. She is alone and she can't trust anyone. And everyone she gets into contact with essentially believes she's insane and wants to contain her so she isn't dangerous to herself or to others. Because of course she is. She's very strong. She's very skilled. And we see how skilled and strong she is as she breaks bones, as she knocks out people, as she is a very dangerous person. It might seem unfair, and some of the things happening to her are outright abuse, but it's also one of those where we really understand why nobody believes her and why people are treating her this way. But that only ups the stakes that we know she's right, and that makes it all the more frustrating. And it just makes her a very, very interesting character. And I feel like I could talk much more about her character, but of course that would make the video much longer than it already is. The more important part is how her character develops. The biggest hurdle for her to overcome is her inability to rely on other people, her inability to trust other people, and her inability to think before she acts. Of course, it also makes her strong, that she is very, very quick at responding to threats, at seeing opportunities, at taking chances. On the other hand, it does make her very, very close to destroying the T-800, which if she had done that, they would have been done for. She's very quick to just shoot what is essentially, in theory, an innocent man. And it is through these developments, it's through her actions and people pointing out that she has taken the wrong actions, that she gets to develop, and that she gets to be this essentially motherly figure. I don't want to use that word too much because that is demeaning what her character is. She's not going to be like this household mom, no, but she does become more motherly. She becomes more caring in a trusting manner. She becomes more caring in a way that she listens to her child, in that she accepts that other people can be right, and that she accepts help when necessary, and to be open. Maybe other people's inputs can be good. And it works so well because, of course, the first half of the movie is her character being in one way, and the second half is her character being another way. And one of the reasons why we see this change is not just about her almost doing the wrong thing, it's also about seeing her son, John Connor, interact with the T-800 and realize that John Connor needs a father figure. That she was successful in raising this son, who is independent, who is clever enough that she should listen to him. And that not only should she listen to him, she also should see what he needs in life. He needs a mother. A very, very good scene is when right when they rescue him, and he just goes to her, the first thing leaving the facility, "Are you all right, Mom?" And she just snaps at him saying, "Why did you do that? Didn't I raise you to be smarter than that? I told you I can take care of myself. You shouldn't have done that." And John Connor starts crying. And who's the father figure here? Who's the parent? Is the T-800. Is the T-800 asking him, "Why are you leaking?" And is the T-800 trying to understand the emotions here, not the mother? That is a very good scene. It shows you how she failed as a mother. She failed at being the mother. She did it all the right ways because she succeeded in creating the soldier the future needs, the leader the future needs. But also she could be more of a mother. And that is what we also see happening throughout the movie. That she understands that she can actually do both. That she can be caring and that she can raise him the right way, the necessary way. That she can be emotional and that she can also be rational and protect him. It almost seems like this movie is having her being a bit toxic masculine. That she needs to get away of her toxic masculinity. Of course, this was before we talked about that, but it is essentially that, yes, she needs to understand that maybe a son needs a parent, as much that also the son needs to learn these qualities. The son is a bit of a hooligan. The son is a rebel. Of course, the resistance needs a leader who is a bit of a rebel, but also a caring leader. A leader who can also lead not just the war to victory against the robots, but after create a new society that's better. And that might be the more soft values that she has failed teaching him. And on that note, I think we should talk about John Connor.
Take a hike, Bozo.
So right off the bat, as much as I praised Linda Hamilton's performance in the first and then the second film, I think Furlong needs a lot of praise for how amazing he is in this movie. He is spectacular. You might wonder, why haven't you seen Furlong in more movies? You might have seen it in some. He is in the Chucky franchise, for example. He plays the adult son in the Child's Play franchise when he becomes an adult. So I think that's the last 3 movies of that franchise. He's actually in it. And he's doing a decent job. I might throw up a few boxes of information here. But the reason why his performance is so great is you can completely understand how his character is behaving based on the way he was raised as a child. You can see why he's a rebel, why he's a misfit. He was raised to be a renegade. Or not so much necessarily to be a renegade, although that is how he has lived. He has lived outside the law in many ways, outside the system, outside society. But he has been raised to be an independent thinker. He's been raised to be a leader. He's been raised to go his own way. He's been raised to use skills that are not really useful in school, practical in society. That doesn't mean that he's not a child anymore or not a teenager. So he still cares probably about girls. We don't really see that. Riding his motorcycle, playing at the arcade. He's still a child, and his childhood has been robbed from him. And that's you do see how his character is now the result of someone who didn't really have a proper childhood. And now he doesn't even have a mother, because growing up with his mother, thinking that the mother was right, and then the mother is locked up in a psychiatric ward after doing something potentially heinous, he's disbelieved. Like, he suddenly thinks that his mother is a terrible mom, and is a negligent mom. And she probably is. He grew up with all these terrible fathers. She probably, from the perspective of society today and society in the 90s, she was probably a terrible mom. If I read about this kind of mom, this kind of militia mom, like if you read about families growing up in some religious cult somewhere, or children being raised by these militias, or whatever it is, you would probably think that they are terrible parents. It makes sense, and that's probably what he's thinking too, that the mom is so caught up in her own struggle, her own delusion about the future, that she couldn't even give him a proper childhood. And now she can't be there for him. That doesn't mean that he doesn't love her. Of course he loves her. We see him loving her, but he feels betrayed. He feels let down. He is disillusioned by this mom. And a lot of trust, a lot of cohesion needs to be built from this. And after seeing the T-800 or T-1000, he realizes his mom is right, and he forgives her completely. And I guess that's rather understandable. Also, he's rather young, so whatever bad feelings he might have, maybe he would spend the next few years developing, trying to understand the feelings that he had a negligent mom. Or, I mean, he's a man in the 90s, so probably he didn't seek out the help he might have needed. But yeah, so that you do understand why the character develops in this way. I thought that was what I wanted to say about John Connor's character, but there are a few more things. He is shown to be like this teenager. He's a very realistic portrayal of someone this age, and I think that's why he's doing it so well. After realizing that the T-800 will obey his every whim. So there's the scene where the T-800 says he won't go and help protect the mom against the T-1000. That makes John Connor scream out, "Help me, help me!" And these two bodybuilders then go to approach Arnold Schwarzenegger. Before they arrive, John Connor realizes that the T-800 is programmed to abide his every command. And that completely changes the dynamic. Suddenly, it's a kid with a toy. It's a kid with a deadly toy. So although he just called out for help, when these two bodybuilders show up to help him, he's being a complete dick to them. He's being a massive asshole. He's showing, like, the renegade he is. And then, okay, yeah, now I have this robot to protect me. So, yeah, I can just be a dick to other people and, like, I can play around. But then Arnold Schwarzenegger gets very, very close to killing them. That short scene, it's about a minute or so. He goes from, oh, I have this nice new toy, to, oh shit, I have this new deadly toy that is going to kill people. So he goes from being a smug teenager, just being an asshole, to realizing, oh shit, this is real. And that realization also changes him so much. It doesn't mean he's not cocky for the rest of the movie. It doesn't mean that he's not being a bit of an asshole here and then. But that small scene is such an educating moment for him, and that's also when he tells the T-800 not to kill people, that you can't do that, even though he's programmed to kill. And it's just a very, very good moment. It does so much in this very, very little time. And it tells us so much about his character. That although he's a renegade, he has a heart. He doesn't want people to be harmed. That although he doesn't care about society, he says fuck the law, fuck everything, he actually cares about everything. Because, again, he also knows that he's probably going to be this leader of the future that needs to care.
What's wrong with your eyes?
Nothing.
Then we of course have the T-800, and the main difference for this character is, of course, in the original it was the antagonist, and now it is the protagonist. And that is a very, very interesting way of doing it. Of course, it's not exactly the same character in that they're just two different T-800 models, but the audience will likely see them as the same character. And Sarah Connor reacts to them as being the same character until she realizes there are stark differences between these two. Of course, one was sent by Skynet, the other one was sent by John Connor in the future. So there are major differences to these two characters, but they look the same. Okay, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the sequel does look 10 years older. That's fine, that's just aging. That's how aging works. And the way Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing the T-800 in the sequel, of course, also deserves a lot of credit. He is doing a stellar job. He's being better at being a robot this time. Of course, he's also just being a better actor, given that the first film came out at the beginning of his acting career, and this is at the peak of his acting career. And then other major character differences. In the original, we have this unstoppable killing machine with very little dialogue, who does everything it can to hunt down and kill Sarah Connor. And now we have, well, still a fairly unstoppable machine, but now sent back to help John Connor. Still a killing machine, as it is established in several scenes. He's asked not to kill, he's still hurting people. He's still shooting him in the knees. He's still doing whatever he needs to do to pacify them so they're no longer a threat, also that they can accomplish the mission, first of saving John Connor, and then later of taking down Skynet. And of course, initially this intrigue comes from how he in the first film was this unrelenting, unfeeling force for destruction that would stop at nothing to kill Sarah Connor and essentially kill John Connor in the process. And now he's not just a protagonist and a protector of John Connor, by extension Sarah Connor, but he's more so humanized. Although still a machine, he becomes more human. And that is a very interesting dynamic. I think that's what makes him such an iconic protagonist in this film. And why, when you put the two movies together, why he's such a memorable and fantastic antagonist-protagonist. Because he has this flip in character. Essentially, of course, still being two different characters, in that he's two different models with two different programs. And it is, I will say, a stroke of genius that James Cameron did this. The way it's executed is a stroke of genius. The way you suddenly fall in love with the killer of the first film. Start caring about the uncaring evil of the first film. James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger do pull off making this robot actually seem human. Even though at that time when he seems the most human, that's when he has taken the most damage to his body. This movie is just amazing, okay? It's so well made. It's so well made, and it's blowing my mind how good this movie is. But yeah, I've said enough about him. I want to quickly talk about the T-1000 Robert Patrick. Wow. This movie would not have been the same without him. Robert Patrick nails it. He doesn't chew the scenery. He does the opposite. He's so good at being this downplayed, almost one-dimensional killing machine. He is mean, he's evil. It says a lot that when he is juxtaposed with Arnold Schwarzenegger in a scene, you are more afraid of him than you are of Arnold. You're more afraid of this thin, mean guy than you are of the hulk of a man. That is speaking volumes to how well Robert Patrick is playing this. He is amazing in this movie. He is maybe one of the best antagonists ever. One thing that does make this character much more terrifying and scary and dangerous than Arnold Schwarzenegger in the original is that not only can he mimic the voice of someone else, the T-800 can do that, but he can take that form. And that is, of course, that works very well. And that does make him a very, very intimidating antagonist. But that doesn't mean that he kills every single thing he comes into contact with. If it's an obstacle, he kills him. So a guy approaching him after a car accident, well, he kills him because he's in the way. He just needs to get away, move on. But then in one very cool scene where he jumps in through the windshield of a helicopter in air, mid-air, he doesn't actually kill the pilot, or the second pilot. He just looks at the guy, and he, understandably so, jumps out of the helicopter. Yeah, he just saw a guy jump through a windshield and transform in this liquidy chrome form into the backseat of that helicopter. So of course he jumps out. Like, what would you do? This you don't want to be in the same helicopter as this being. And I want to say more about his character, but then we'll move into the special effects territory. With a budget of $100 million US, when this film came out, it was the most expensive movie that had ever been made. Although I'm not sure if that is adjusted for inflation. And of course, James Cameron would do it again with Titanic, and then I think also later with Avatar, that he just keeps making more expensive movies because, yeah, well, why not? If you have the money and that's your thing, we know that less is sometimes more, that sometimes you get more better movies with smaller budgets. But anyway, so where did this budget go? Of course, a lot of it went into special effects, but it also went into, for example, the big chase in LA, the car chase with the truck and everything. That was a very costly scene, and it's a very, very amazing scene, a very iconic scene, so I'm very, very glad they spent the budget on that. One of the best chases in any movie ever made. Then it, of course, also a lot of the budget went into the big shootout with the police, with a lot of things blowing up. Another spectacular scene, but yes, special effects is where a lot of the money was spent. And this came out in 91, at a time where CGI was in its infancy. And it shows, but it doesn't show as much as it does with other movies. One thing I often have a problem with when watching 90s movies, especially 90s sci-fi, horror, and sometimes also action, is that the CGI is often awful and ruin the scenes they're in. If you've seen other videos on my channel, you're probably familiar with how much I praise practical effects, because I do. And although I do love practical effects, I don't dislike CGI when it's done well, and when it doesn't break immersion or anything. And where does Terminator 2 stand here? Of course, it's not spectacular, but the CGI holds up very well. Much better than you might expect. One of the reasons is that the CGI, much of it is just this chrome figure. He's not really meant to have many features in the chrome form. So it's quite simple CGI when you see him coming into shape. But it's simple in the way where it still works. It doesn't look amazing, it does look sometimes like an old video game, but it's good enough. It never really breaks immersion. There was one scene where it looked a bit shitty. But in all other scenes, I was completely on board with it. Some of the scenes looked a bit more silly. One of the very cool things that the T-1000 can do is that he can mimic any object, so he can become completely liquidy. And he does, in one scene, turn into a floor. And then when the floor takes the shape of a person, that doesn't look as great as it could had been made today. It wasn't immersion breaking really, but it wasn't one of the better scenes in the film. Although the idea is amazing. It's a really cool idea, and it blew people's minds when it first happened. And there are other scenes that you would expect maybe hadn't aged that well, such as when he passes through bars, or when they're in a foundry and he starts melting to the floor. and sticking to the floor. But those scenes actually hold up quite well. Also when he extends his arms as weapons, or when he blows into small pieces and then slowly reassemble. It's all quite good. A lot of the special effects, a lot of the CGI focuses on his character. That's what makes him such a cool antagonist. Not just how well Robert Patrick portrays him, but also how well the CGI portrays him. How he's capable of a lot of things because of CGI. Yeah, this movie would not really have been made possible without CGI. So I understand why it ended up costing this much, because if they'd done a poor job at the CGI, it would have looked horrible. But they managed to use archaic technology to make something that still stands the test of time, which is quite remarkable. A crowning achievement. And it's not just the CGI that works very well in this film. Also the deterioration of Arnold Schwarzenegger when he starts having tears in his face and you see the robot underneath. That works very well, that looks very, very good. Or when you see his robot arm in one scene where he tears off his own arm, exposing his robot, that good. And although we only have one short scene at the very beginning of the film, set in the future, that scene looks so much better than anything in the original. One thing that I did criticize the first film for was that the future scenes didn't look that great. It looked like models flying around. The composition did break your immersion a bit. It didn't look that great. This film has no such problem. The robots look amazing, the explosions look amazing, the fight between the robots and the humans. And also when you see the robots in complete robot form, the Terminators, the T-800s in complete robot form, they look great. That's something that has just really improved since the first film. I don't have much more to say right now, but I do want to touch on the lighting, cinematography, and the sound design. For the cinematography, it's great. I don't have anything else really to comment on it. Very, very short. Yeah, it works well. Nothing really too innovative, but everything just works well. The cinematography is great. And then we have the lighting, and one thing that I did say that the first film had a lot of was the blue tint. This film has even more of it. Of course, not all the scenes we have, of course the California, the Mexico scenes have the Mexico tint, but of course a lot of the scenes have this blue tint that I associate with James Cameron, and that I associate a lot with the 90s. And yeah, this film has a lot of that. The lighting, yeah, is great. Nothing really more to say there. Then the sound design, and this is one of the more interesting things. So one thing I really praised the first film for was having a spectacular soundtrack, and also to have really good sound design on top of that. A lot of good accompanying music, a lot of good effects to go with the film. Now, what's interesting about Terminator 2 is that the sound design is much more mellow, almost quiet. It's very toned down, it's used very effectively, but suspense in this film is created more by not having sound, or having very subtle hints of sound. There are many scenes that are very, very quiet, almost silent, aside from maybe steps or someone speaking, with almost no detectable background sound or no music. And there are other scenes that of course use more music, but also music isn't really created in a way to make you feel like there's no melodramatic music, there's no dramatic music, there's very little comedic music in it for these bonding experiences, which I do appreciate. But of course it does use music and sound as well. It has one of the most iconic themes of any film, even more iconic than the original. Absolutely spectacular theme. It has some scenes where this sound and music is used very, very well. Of course, some of the action scenes, it really pumps up the music. So some of the action scenes, it's more used in a generic way that you would expect from films, whereas in some of the other scenes, such as the hospital scene, and that's where I especially noticed it, that it's just very quiet. So it really works well with this music. Sometimes almost a contrapunctual use of music, sometimes very accompanying, sometimes it plays with your expectations. The sound design is just amazing here, and I think it deserves a lot of credit. Here at the end of reviewing Terminator 2, I do have some closing remarks. Why does this movie work so well? Why is it often recognized as one of the best sequels ever made? I think it's quite simple. It does what a good sequel should do, by taking the original premise of the first film, expanding the universe, developing the characters, opening up the ante. Yes, the T-800 is intimidating in the first film. He seems like an absolute force of nature that cannot be stopped, but he is stopped. So what do you do then? You create an even more fierce enemy, an even more scary enemy, an even more unstoppable, unrelenting enemy in the T-1000. That is an amazing antagonist. That's a really, really good way of opening the ante, of heightening the tension, of heightening the danger. But what do you then do? Arnold Schwarzenegger was such a huge part of the first film. Aha! You cast him as the protagonist. You subvert expectations by making him a protagonist. It's such a clever move. I mean, I'm not saying that it requires an IQ of 1,000,000 to pull this off, but it's such a good idea and it's pulled off so well. Yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you create an even more fierce enemy. An enemy that is so dangerous and scary that you need the enemy of the first film to help you, and even then you are failing or almost failing at overcoming the enemy. It's such a good idea, and it works so well. And it's combining all these things and doing all these things so well that makes it such a good movie and such a good sequel. And also, one thing that's a bit unfair to the first film, this movie has a much bigger budget. So it can afford doing everything better. Not just bigger budget, but access to better technology. So it can afford making better practical effects. The first film had good practical effects, but this one has much better practical effects. The first film has some car chases, but it can be a bit confusing and it takes place during the night and of course in less crowded streets. The sequel has a car chase during daylight, one of the best car chases in movie history. The first film has action scenes. The second film has insane action scenes. So it is a bit unfair, but this film, all the things it does, it essentially does better than the first film, just because it has a bigger budget, a more talented director and a more talented actor, a more talented cast essentially as well. And that is just a bit unfair to the first film, and I think I can say this, that yes, it is in all measurable ways that are comparative, it is better than the first film, but that doesn't mean that the film itself might necessarily be better. They are two very, very different movies. The first film is more of a thriller, of course, action thriller, with a very different character dynamic, with a different story that's all about trying to flee while also overcoming the enemy. In this one, we already know what the danger is, but we are still unsure in the beginning, and then they have to break out the mom, and then they flee, but then they decide to declare war on Skynet, so it has a very different story that creates very different pacing. All the dynamics are very different, and yeah, so the movies are just two very, very different movies, and that's why even though I say that this movie is doing everything better than the first film, it doesn't mean that the movie is necessarily better. That being said, I do prefer it to the first film.
In summing up, it's the Constitution, it's Marbo, it's justice, it's law, it's the vibe, and no, that's it, it's the vibe. I rest my case.
But I do love both movies a lot. I think they are spectacular movies, and in a way I wish we could end it here, although I'm not gonna say what happens, but the original ending of Terminator 2, I'm not sure I like it. I think the original ending, it could have ended before the epilogue. The epilogue is a bit lame, in my opinion. One thing that will happen when we start going into the sequels is that after the Terminator 2, we do have branching universes. We have to have branching timelines, which does create some conundrums, some issues with discussing the movie, discussing the franchise that we will get into. But of course, what I'm saying here, unless if you're not aware of it, I'm covering the entire Terminator franchise. That's what I'm in the process of doing. It takes a lot of time. So yeah, I'm not sure when the next film will be out, but I will be covering Terminator 3 to see how these two amazing movies, what will follow these two, some of the best films ever made, what will follow these two movies. Well, we'll see what happens next. I do know it. I had to see this in the cinema as a kid, so I know what to expect, but I haven't seen it since, so I'm actually a bit curious to see what happens in Terminator 3. But that's all I want to say, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you want to see this next film. If you have some comments about what I missed in this review, please leave a comment, or maybe subscribe if you want to see me cover the rest of the Terminator franchise. Although, expect me to not upload the next video probably in the next few months, but I will be uploading other things in the meantime, smaller videos, smaller reviews, some other things going on. So if that sounds interesting, you can subscribe. And yeah, aside from that, I'll see you next time. Bye.